We'll do a review in Likutei Sichos in Chelik Chof Ches, volume 28, the second Sicha for the Parshas Pichas. This is a Rashi Sicha in which the Rebbe explains how Rashi teaches the words of Bi Moyadoi, that you should bring the korban in its time. And Rashi says that every day is the time of the Tmidim. And the Rebbe will explain first why Rashi has to explain it differently than he explained it elsewhere, that B'moyeda means even B'Shabbos, even B'Tuma, and why this is different, why Rashi cannot explain like the Ibn Ezra explains. But eventually the Rebbe brings out that there's a tremendous chiddush in this Rashi. If we explain it the way the Rebbe explains, the question becomes, what happens if one missed out one day, did not bring the korban tamid? Should he bring it on the next day? And the Rebbe is going to show that how it may be different than Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh, in which we have a pasuk that you can't bring it the next Shabbos, Shabbos b'Shabbato, v'Chodesh b'Chodshei, as the Rebbe will detail. It's a long, detailed Sicha. It's also, there is a Yono Shel Torah in the end of the Sicha. We'll go step by step. We're learning this Lilu Nishmas, Rav Levi Yitzchok ben Rabbi Chaim Tzvi, a dedicated shaliach, and passed away in the middle of his prime of his life. Tainish Mosei through Rachaim, learning it to benefit his soul. Pinchas base. In Pasik, Tzav es b'nei Yisrael v'amarta aleihim. So the Pasik says, command the children of Israel and say to them, as korbani lachmi li ishai, the sacrifice, which is my bread that comes to my fires, reich nechochi, it's my pleasant aroma, tishmeru lahakriv li b'moyadoi, you should guard to offer it in its time. Stellt sich Rashi auf dem Wort b'moyadoi. So Rashi says, places himself on the word b'moyadoi in its time. On his mefarish, and he explains, what does it mean in its time? B'chol yom hu moyed hatmidim. Every day is the time of the tmidim. Bring it in its time, meaning that the constant korbanos, the time is every day. What is Rashi telling us over here, that the time of the tmidim is every day? That's what it says specifically in the next pasuk. What is Rashi coming to add to what it says beferish in the next pasuk? Darfen verstehen, we need to understand, was is Rashi moisif of them was steht beferish takef in the pasuk shalachar. What is Rashi adding to that which is stated explicitly immediately in the following pasuk? Dorten steht, what it says in the next pasuk is Shnayim layoim, you bring the two sheep every day, oila, as a burnt offering, tamid, constantly, every day. It says as there is man hakrovas hatmidim is tamid, the time when do we offer the tmidim? Always, every day, b'chol yoyim. Is zu luvos darf das Rashi mefarish sein in the ersten pasuk. So why does Rashi need to explain this in the first pasuk auf Wort b'moyadei, on the word in its time, to tell you that it's every day, which is essentially that's what it says immediately in the next pasuk. So the Rebbe brings down that the Ram learned, the Rebbe Eliyahu Mizrahi, he explains, as Rashi kommt nit zogen, ados is a mitzvah and heges b'chol yom. Rashi is not intending to tell us here that this is a mitzvah that is conducted every day. Warum das steht doch meforish in Pasuk now? Because this is stated very explicitly in the verse, as we said before. We know that it's every day. The Pasuk says Shnaim Layom Oila Summit. So therefore, Rabbi Leon Mizrahi explains, Nor Hachi Pirusha. This is what it means. As jeden Tag is der Zman HaTmidim. That Rashi is trying to tell that every day is the time of the Tmidim. And there's nothing that can hold back. Even if it's your tummy, still you'll be bringing the carbon oil every day. That's essentially like saying that that you bring the carbon even betuma. As Rashi says in other places, they learn, Rabbi Yom Mizrahi learns that what it says that Azman, that B'chol Yom that Midim, that Rashi intends to say here that every day that it doesn't matter, even if their Tama used to bring the Tama. Aber der Pirush in Rashi is L'chayre Tzorichi in Godel. This interpretation in Rashi needs to be looked into a lot because it doesn't really fit. Rashi had geschrieben Pirushei Oich Fara ben Chomesh L'Mikra. Rashi wrote his commentary also for a 5-year-old who is supposed to start learning Chumash. Hainu, which means Beloshun Berura Oich Farem, meaning that the language needs to be clear also for a child who is starting to learn, a 5-year-old. Und ob Rashi wohl gemeint sagen, if Rashi meant to say, as mizmakriv dit tmidim alamol, that you offer these tmidim all the time, afilu betuma, even if you tome, but the does gesagt beferish, then Rashi would have said this clearly. He would have said this openly. Al derech ver zogt in parshas Ba'aloischa. Similar as Rashi says in the portion of Ba'aloischa when it comes to the Korban Pesach, El Gabe the word over there it says you bring the Pesach b'moyade, welcher steht by Korban Pesach, which is written by the Korban Pesach. So Rashi teaches it ab b'Shabbos, ab b'Tumah. You bring it also on Shabbos and also when you're tummy. So Rashi would have said here, not just b'chol yom u'meidat midim, it would say even b'Tumah. So it's very difficult to understand. Euch darf man verstehen. But since Rashi is not saying this, how come Rashi doesn't just say like he said in the Parshas Ba'aloischa? Euch darf man verstehen, was is do Rashi nit mefarish? How come, really, Rashi, how come actually Rashi doesn't explain it? That you bring the Korban Tomid, whether it's Shabbos, whether you're tummy, you still bring it, just as Rashi says in Ba'aloischa. So first the Rebbe said Rashi doesn't mean this because Rashi writes clearly, and for Ben Chamish L'Mikra this is not clear. That's number one. And number two, why Taka does Rashi not learn this? On Afal Pi as v'negei l'Shabbos, darfen do v'pirush Rashi nit kein limud. As far as Shabbos goes, we don't need in this Rashi to learn out from B'moyadoi that you bring it on Shabbos. Weil da steht beferish weiter in Pasuk. This says very clearly, openly, further on the Pasuk. Oilas Shabbos b'Shabbatay. So you bring the Musav, the extra oila, every Shabbos, the Korban Musav. Al oilas hatamid, on top, after you bring the oilas hatamid. So it says that you bring oilas hatamid on Shabbos. But we still need, would seem, to learn as mizmakriv them tamid afilu betuma, that you would be offering tamid betuma. So why does Rashi not learn that the Moyada is coming to say that even if you're tamid, you bring the korban tamid, just like Rashi learns b'moyedei by the korban Pesach. For Shabbos, we don't need, because the pasuk says alilasa tamid, that you brought the korban tamid on Shabbos. But for Tuma, how do we know that? So why doesn't Rashi just say that? So now the Rebbe brings down an interpretation of the Even Ezra. He learns b'boyade in time. You have to bring it not earlier than the morning and not later than the nighttime. You have to bring it in time. That's the interpretation. So why does Rashi not want to learn like him? Base. That Even Ezra teaches b'moyade, that Even Ezra translates b'moyade, shelo yikad mekoid b'aboker v'shelo yachar achar ha'erev. Don't make it before morning, and don't delay it after the evening. Und lefizeh is moving farvos as darf stein b'moyade. And according to that, we understand why it needs to say b'moyade, meaning that you need to bring it in the time. Av al pi steht weiter. Even though it says later, Shnaim layoim oila somid, it says that you bring two all the time. One of the sheep is done in the morning with and the second sheep you do in the afternoon. Still, the Torah has to say that don't do it earlier. The pasuk kommt madgish zayin zmanei hameduyak. Over there, the pasuk says one in the morning and one in the evening, but here the pasuk says b'moyadei in the time, the exact time. Shalo yikadmoi, don't make it before the morning. Shalo yachad, don't make it later. That's the way the Even Ezra learns. So, but so biur. So we need to understand. Pavos Rashi, Pavos nit Rashi al derech v'deh pirush from Even Ezra. How come Rashi doesn't learn similar to the Even Ezra's interpretation? Vos loit im is mubam Pavos is darvstein b'moyed. Here we understand why he needs to say b'moyed to give you the boundaries. Und das ist a pirush welcher legt sich b'pshutish amikra. This is an interpretation which fits the simple meaning of the pasuk. So why does Rashi not learn like the Even Ezra? And Rashi learns that b'moyedei means b'chol yom u'moyedat midim, that every day is the time of the tmidim, and which we don't know what is it adding. Rashi could have said like the Even Ezra, that it's telling you precisely it has to be dafke morning and no later than the nighttime. So why doesn't Rashi learn like that? And the Rebbe is going to explain that in the word b'moyadoi in Bahaloischa, it's Rashi is troubled by a different problem than the moyadoi than over here. Over there, b'moyadoi, that it seems to be extra. So why is the moyadoi telling it? The Torah tells you exactly when you bring the korban Pesach on the 14th of the month of Nisan. So what does the Torah add by saying you should bring it in the time? It already says the time. So therefore, Rashi says that it's coming to add even Tuma, even Shabbos, you still bring it extras. In our pasuk, it's not that it's extra. In our pasuk, it doesn't really fit to say bring it in the time when every day is the time. So it's not like, what does it mean, bring it on the time? There is no time for a korban tamid because you bring it every day. Let's look inside. Gimel. So we can say the explanation in this. The chiluk zwischen Pirush Rashi beParshoseinu and Pirush Rashi in Parshas Ba'aloischa, the difference between Rashi's commentary in our Parsha and Rashi's commentary in Parshas Ba'aloischa is, in Parshas Ba'aloischa kommt Rashi mefarish sein dem Yitur von dem Wort b'moyadei. In the portion of Ba'aloischa, Rashi is coming to explain the extra word b'moyadei. It says bring the Pesach and the time. Warum der Posik ist dort gleich Mamshich Zmanei Hamaduyuk, the Posik immediately, after saying bringing in time, the Posik tells you the precise time. Barbo Osor Yoim Bachoidish Hazebein Arboim. On the 14th month of this, on the 14th day of this month, of the month of Nisan, in the afternoon. So we have exact time there. So what does the Pasuk say? Bring it on the time. It's an extra word. The Rebbe learned Rashi. Therefore, Rashi learns as the Yitur kum zu losen Herren anayin din, that this extra is coming to teach us a new halacha. That the Pasuk adds b'moyedei, av b'Shabbos, b'moyedei av b'tumah. And the time comes to tell us, even if 14th is on Shabbos, and even if the people are Tomei, you can still bring the Korban Pesach. That's in Parshas Baloischa. Masha'en can be Parshas Seinu, as opposed to in our Parshas Barashi Shver, der Teich from the word b'moyedei. What is the translation of the word b'moyedei? Der Pasha der Teich from b'moyedei. What does it mean? Simply, in the time, in its time, is in the Mizman, was is the Roiv Bashtim geworden. That means in its time, the time that has been designated, assigned for it, bring it in the assigned time. Wie Rashi teicht lamoyed, in the pasuk when it says to the time, to the time that I have set for you. It says lamoyed, that will come back and she'll have a son. Sora, the Malachim promised her. So lamoyed means moyed to that time designated that I set up. I will be back at that time. So a time means a special time designated. That is meaning moyed. But what does it mean, a special time for korban when it's all the time? There's no special time. Balpizeh. We can understand as it pertains to the karbonis of Shabbos, the karbonis extra, the musaf of Shabbos, the musaf of Rosh Chodesh, and the musaf of the holidays, the regolim. We understand what the time is, that there's a time. Karbonis was kumem mizman lizman. Those are karbonis that come from time to time. So each one has a time. Is moving the Loshen B'Meir that we understand the language in its time. Yet their korban is ben makriv in the kavodik tog. Each korban, these additional korbanos, you offer in that day that was said, was mahot farim bashtimt, that had been set up, which is specially designated for him for this korban. So you bring the korban in the set time that was set for this korban. So that fits Rosh Chodesh, Shabbos, and Yom Tov. But as it relates to korban tamid, Rashi's problem is was farim is nicht ausgeteilt geworden as spezieller Tag. There has not been separated a special day. Mizimakriv ständig tamid, you offer it constantly, always tamid. Jeden Tag, every day, ukishmoy korban tamid, oilo tamid. Korban tamid, kanza oilo tamid. Passt doch nicht bei ihm zu sagen dem Loschen b'mayade. So it doesn't fit to say the language in its time. Und der Fahr lernt nicht Rashi with der Pirusha Eben Ezra. So over here, what does it mean on its time? When there's no time. There's no time designated. So bring the korban and the time designated for it. There's no time designated. It's every day. And that's why Rashi learned the Pirush Eben Ezra shelo yikadmu koidem haboker v'shelo ya'achir achar ha'erev, not to make it before the morning and not to delay it after. But only Pirushe but tzitzich b'moyadei, because according to the Even Ezra, in its time, nit oiv dem zman hamiyud v'kavua lekorban tomid. It doesn't refer to the time b'moyadei, in the time designated or set up for the korban tomid, nor b'moyadei is hagbola, nor if hagbola, a limitation in dem zman gufa. It's not the designed time, but within the time there is a designated time within it, not early, not later. If agbolim dem zman gufa, was mizmakri b'chol yom v'yom, that within the time, not to make it earlier or later. As mendarv zayin zohir, that you must be careful of nit magdim zayin zman koydem haboker, not to precede the time before the morning, or nit macher zayin zman lacher erev, and not to delay the time after the evening. Was of them past nit der Ausdruck, but over there it doesn't fit the expression b'moya adoy, do the korban on the designated time. Here you're not saying that they're a designated time, you're just adding some limitation. Das is nit am moyed kavua. That's not a set time. Der ausgetelter Zman far Tommy. This is not the special separated time for the Tamid. The Moya Ade, what is the time for the Tamid? This is a connection, a law, and it's really for all karbonis. You can bring it early, you can bring it later, but it's not a unique designated moyed, a time that has been set up for korban tamid. So that's number one. So b'moyed the Rashi needs it to mean that unique designated time that was set aside for the korban tamid, not within the time to give us extra. Besides the point, the Rebbe says that it doesn't fit that the Torah, before giving you the time, which is Shnaim Layoim Oila Samid, he's already telling you not earlier, not later. We didn't tell you the time yet. We're telling you that don't do it earlier or later before we even told you when that you have to do it in the morning or the evening. It's also not logical to translate in the simple meaning of the pasuk like this above explanation. Warum demult wohl bemoyedei gedarf gesagt werden? Then the time bemoyedei earlier or later should have been said. Nachdem wie the Torah sagt dem Zman hakloli va'proti von hagravose, when the Torah gives you the general time every day and the specific time of when and every day, in the morning and the afternoon. And then you tell us when the bemoyedei. So first the Torah should say Shnaim layoim oila samid. As then tell you one comes in the morning. One comes in the afternoon. And then the Torah says not to do it earlier and then later. Vorum der is lipirushe, because according to the Even Ezra, b'moyedei nit came bir in them etzem zman. That's not explaining the time when the time for a korban tamid. It is only noraprat unhagbole zmane akloli. It's a detailed and it's a limitation. The general time, the yoim, the general time of this day, va'proti the bekir ben Abraham, and the details, the time and the specific within the day, what time. We're coming to give you a limitation, a detail. Not to make it before the morning and not to delay after the Erev. So that comes after telling you what the general time and the detail within the day. Von dem was the Torah is magdim dem Wort b'moyadoi, eider dem zman hakloli. From the fact that the Torah introduces first b'moyadoi before it tells you the general time, Balachas kama v'kama eded and protestikens man for yedin tomid. And how much more so that this is written even telling you even before the detailed time of every tomid that baboiker ubein arbayim within the day. The Torah didn't tell you that, so Torah is not giving you a limit on baboiker ba'era because we didn't learn yet. The Torah wrote b'moyed before this. Is move on so it's understood as der b'moyed ret in dem etzem zman zaynim. This is talking about the actual time, what the time is of the korban, when you bring the korban b'moyed in the time, not a limitation within the time. The river is Rashi mefarish. So Rashi has a problem. So what does it mean? How could you bring a tamid and time? What is the time of a tamid? There is no time every day. But Rashi is mefarish. B'chol yom hu moyedat midim. But every day is the time of the midim. As the posik to the oif anayu hagdora. The posik comes up here and give us this novel idea that there is a new definition as it pertains to the korban tamid, which means Pashtus lernt men simply we learn as korban tamid is nit gleich zu alle korbanos hamayadim, that the korban tamid is not the same, is not equal to all the korbanos of times of the festival when there's times. Everybody has its time. Zaizman kavua, it's a time. That's how we learn simply. Mashenkin Tomid, the way we see it. How did Kemoyet kavua? It doesn't have any time. It's always. Makriv Tomid jeden Tag. You offer it constantly, every day. Und der Rebbe wird angerufen, Eilos Tomid. That's why it's called the Tomid Eila. But so why does the pasuk say b'moyadoi? Time sagt Rashi, am is b'moyadoi, kum der pasuk zogen, but b'moyadoi, the pasuk is coming to tell us, as the pirush is nit azoi, that this is not really the interpretation. Nor as b'chol yoim hu moyadat midim. No, it's the Eibishter is distinguished every day for this korban. Jeder Tag is a moyed on oisgetelter zman. Every day is the time. It's a separated time for a krovas hatomid shel yom zev that day. Yes, there is a time every day, just like every Shabbos, every Rosh Chodesh, every Yom Tov. There's every day. That's a special time separated for that korban. Kol yom yom b'fnei atzmei is a bezunder moyed zman for dem tomid for dem tog. Each day by itself is a separated time. It's a moyed for them, tom for them tog, b'yoyme for the tomid that we bring in that day. So that's b'moyed. So b'moyed teaches you how to interpret. Rashi tells you what does it mean b'moyed. There's no time, and Rashi says no. Every day is a time that is called its time. So what difference does it make if we call it a time or it's not? Why does the Torah have to tell us that each day is its own time? And the Rebbe will explain that this may make a difference. As a result, we can make a difference if a person misses out and doesn't bring the korban tamid of one day, whether he should bring it the next day. And the Rebbe brings down how is the din by Rosh Chodesh and as and Shabbos, by the Shabbos. The man of Kimina Oter get of no korban tamid. What difference does it make that every day is a designed and special day for it? As b'chol yom u'moed that midim, that every day is the time for the midim. Is this moving by Pashtus? This is simply understood. Weiter in der Parsha b'negei dem korban from Shabbos. Later on, the same Parsha, with regards to the Shabbos korban, stellt sich Rashi of the Werter. So Rashi places himself on the words. It says, Oilas Shabbos b'Shabbatay. The oil of the Shabbos you have to bring on that Shabbos. Unis befarish, what it means. The lo oilas Shabbos b'Shabbos acheres. You can't bring an oil on this Shabbos and another Shabbos. And Rashi explains, Harei shlohikri b'Shabbosu. Let's say he missed out and he didn't bring the korban oil, the musaf on one Shabbos. Shemei ani. So then you would think, I would think, Yakri Stein, the Shana b'Shabbos habo. Let him bring two on the next Shabbos. Amud loymar b'Shabbatay. So that's why the pasuk says in the Shabbos, Magid shim over yoymei batel korbanot. This tells us that if the day has passed, the korban is gone. Oh, oilas Shabbos b'Shabbatay. Cannot bring the Shabbos of this korban if you missed out. You're not going to bring two the next Shabbos. So what is the din with regards to a korban tamid? Yesh la'ayin. Can look at is der din b'negei l'tamid. What is the din with regard to tamid? Tziba korban tamid yakriv shnayim liyom haba. If he missed out one day, can he bring the next day too? Other, or we'll say like we say by Shabbos, avar yoma im avar yoma batel korbanot. The day has passed. There's no korban. So first the Rebbe says, well, we can't really learn this and say, just like by Shabbos, the same thing is by the day korbanos. We can't really learn it from that way because we see that we don't learn Rosh Chodesh from Shabbos, so we can't learn a regular day, the Tamid, from Shabbos. So one would think, since we don't have a special pasuk by Korban Tamid, maybe he should bring the next day, or it doesn't work. So first the Rebbe says, we know it doesn't work for Shabbos because we have a pasuk. And then, so you can say, maybe we learn from Shabbos for the regular Tamid. As for Shabbos, let me this up, that from Shabbos we learn it, as it pertains to all the korbanos. So maybe we'll say that. And Rashi, and that also would be fitting in the precise language of Rashi. Rashi says Magid. This teaches us, so it tells us for other places as well. She'im over yoimoy. Rashi says, if the day passes by, it's not unique for Shabbos. Nit im over Shabbat, not just if the Shabbos passes by. Was der mit is Magid. So from this, you learn, as by a korban, over yoimei, the talk from Yadin korban is bottle korbanei, the korban is bottle. So that would mean, if we're having a question with regards to korban tamid, that you can't do it, just like you can't do by Shabbos and Magid, that a korban can't be the next day. But the Rebbe says from the fact that we have another pasuk later on by Rosh Chodesh, why don't we learn Rosh Chodesh from Shabbos? Is a siman that we need a pasuk for each one. So we don't have a pasuk for korban tamid. So beschwer zu sagen also, this is difficult to say so. But mit etliche psukim weiter, because with a few verses later on, auf dem pasuk on the verse, Zois Oilas Chodesh b'Chadshay. This is the oila of the month, each month. Sagt Rashi says, Shim over yom batel korbanim v'shuvein le'tashlumim. That if the day has passed, so the korban is nullified, and you can't make up for a chodesh. Once chodesh is over, you can't make up. The fun is moving, so it's understood that we can't learn from Shabbos. As the limit for Eile Shabbos b'Shabbatay is nit b'negei yedin korban. That when we learn from Shabbos b'Shabbatay is not for all korbanos. That's why we need a special pasuk for Rosh Chodesh. Noch mehr. Afilu b'negei lekorbanos hamoyadim, even as it pertains to the korbanos of the Yom Tovim, steht a besonder limud. There is a separate lesson we learn out from the Torah. Frier in Parshas Emer, if Dvar Yomei talks about the Yom Tovim to bring each one on the day, Taicher Ashio im over Yomei bottle korbanet. But if the day passes, over there, Rashi says, with the God Yontif, there is no more korbanos. There's no, so you can't make up for the korban of a moed later on. So since we don't have a pasuk so we can't learn from Shabbos because we see that we have a pasuk Sefer Chodesh and Sefer Yom Tov to tell you that you can't bring it after the day that the korban is bought. But by korban tamid, where there's no pasuk for that, maybe you can bring a second korban on the next day. So according to this, it would turn out as when the gates korban tamid zokt man nit im over yema bottle korbanai. Over here, we don't say that the day passes, there's no korban. The loike chol korbanos can out. That would be different than all the korbanos. A chiddush that a korban tamid, if you missed out, you can bring the next day. However, the Rebbe says that based on our explanation that every day, Rashi says, Rebbe says, what's the difference that every day is its own time? So then we know that you can't bring, once the time is not there, you can't bring it up. He's bir anal, Pirush Rashi Yishlam. But based on the earlier explanation of Rashi, we can say, as the din is oik by korban tamid, that this halacha is also by korban tamid that you can't make up the next day. V'bald as der gather from korban tamid is kenal. Since a korban tamid, now we're saying it's not that you always bring. Nit lois amadav ständig b'chol yem makros ana korban. Not just you need to bring every day. Nor b'chol yem humoyed that midim every day is the time for that tamid. Yet the tog is abzunder moyed. Every day is a separate yomtiv. An ois getelter zman kovua dumiyud for akrovas hatomid yom zeh. It has been a distinguished, separated, specific time and designated for the korban of that day. If b'meila move on, so then it's understood as oich oif tomid, that also on tomid is chalder klal as oif over yom. If the day passes, since there is a specific day for that korban, then is miyud for akrovas torban the yom zeh, which is designated for bringing the korban yom zeh, is batel korbanei, because it's not that day's korban, and therefore it's like all of the korbanos, just like Rosh Chodesh, just like Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, Yom Tov, over Yom batel korbanei. But we still have an issue. Why over there we have a pasuk over there that you can't do it on Shabbos, Eil Shabbos, Shabbat, and on the other Rosh Chodesh and Yom Tov we have a special limud. How come we don't need a limud? Just we're saying that it's its own moyed, and that alone tells us that we can't bring it the other day. Why is it? How is it different? And the Rebbe says that originally, the Rebbe is going to explain further later on, but the Rebbe explains that the designated time of the festival, Rosh Chodesh, Shabbos, and Yom Tov, it's not that the korban makes it this designated time. The designated time has to do Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh. Those are designated times, and the Torah says in those designated times you bring a korban. So therefore, it's possible if you didn't bring it, you can bring it another time. But by Tamid, the whole designated time is for the korban. So it doesn't really, you can't bring this korban because the korban makes it a designated time. So what are you going to make up for not bringing it in this day? That's not going to make it. That's the designation is made of it. Let's look inside. Hey, von deswegen darf man nicht haben auf dem alimud miyuchad. We don't need a special lesson for carbon tomid that you can't bring it in the next day. As euch by tomid is der din, that also by tomid halach is over yom chulu. Even though the Rebbe says that it is the case because each one is its own day, is over yom bottle korbanei, but we don't need a pasuk for that. After Pichas Shabbos wird der Golem sein doch sicher ausgeteilte Tag. Shabbos and Yom Tov are definitely separated days. Was means makribem korban, that you bring a korban. Ba'alfa pikein, and still darfen bazeh yom ma pasuk v'limud b'yuchat. Over there, we do need a special verse and a special lesson as im over yom bottle korbanek, that the day passes, the korban is bottle. So how come we're saying over here, well, it's a new day, so we know that it's bottle korbanis? And the Rebbe explains, there's a big difference between the korbanis Shabbos, and the korban tamid. The Ausgeteiltkeit legabe Shari Meis Hashana von Shabbos or Regolim, the distinction of relative to other days of the year, Shabbos is distinguished, the festivals is distinguished, isn't it? It's not because you bring the korban that makes the distinction. No, mitzad atzma. They are distinguished by themselves. Shabbos is Yom Kodesh. Shabbos is a holy day. And is also b'melacha. That's not to do with the korban. So the distinction of Shabbos is not the korban. It's the Torah makes it distinct. It's also b'melacha. V'aderech zeh the Yom Tov. Seinen the Yomim Tovim, and similar the Yomim Tovim, seinen Yomim Yuchodim, B'Yisrael Melacha Mitzvahs Ham Yuchodim Lehem. They are days which is prohibited to do Melacha, and the special mitzvahs that are designed for those Yomim Tovim. So they are distinguished in essence. The Torah adds according to them. Not in the tag, Kumetzu Oichiyuven for bringing Korbanos and Yuchodim Lehem. There is added obligation to bring korbanos that are special for them. Underfar, and therefore, is leidem limud miyuchad. Had we not have a special lesson that says no, only on the day, and over yom bottle korbanei, what man ken sein kasal kadaitoch. There could be a thought as mizol dem korban mashlim sein b'Shabbos haba. Maybe you should bring the korban on the following Shabbos. Because there is a designation of that day outside of that, and if we didn't do the korban, we should do it on another day. Torah says in this designated day, bring a korban. If you didn't do it in that, bring another time. As opposed to when we talk about the korban tamid, is like Pirush Rashi, as b'chol yom u'meidat midim. So according to Rashi, says that every day is its own day, is the time for the midim. Is the Ausgeteiltkeit von dem Tag nur durch zu lieb dem Korban Yom Zeh. What distinguishes this day, it's only through and because of the korban for that day. That makes it distinguished. Mainly is pashut, and therefore it's obvious. As im over Yomai, if the day passes, der Tag was is ausgeteilt, miyud for dem Tomid shel Yom Zeh. So if the day that is designed, and the special design is to bring a korban, and you didn't do it, is bottle korbanei. The korban is bottle. Kemenes didn't bring him morgen. Was is ausgeteilt b'fnei atzmei, and that day is its own time. Was is for them tamid yom from that day, from the morgen of the next day. So you're not going to bring the korban from this the next day. In Shabbos and Yom Tov, which are distinguished by themselves, and the Torah adds a korban. So you can say, if you missed a special distinction, the actual korban brought for this day, bring in the next Shabbos, bring in the next Yom Tov. But over here, there is no special day because it's a special day. It's a special day because you bring that korban. So the next special day, they can't bring the carbon from this day. So therefore, we know that you don't bring a carbon. We don't need a pasuk for that. So basically, the Rebbe says you can't bring a carbon if you missed that one day. You can't bring the next day. We don't need a pasuk for that because it doesn't fit to bring the next day when it has its own kavua. But by the other ones we have a pasuk, even though they're distinguished day, but the distinction is made up because they're a yontav, asubim locha, they're special mitzvahs. So maybe if you missed on the carbon, you should bring it. That's why we need a pasuk. But the Rebbe doesn't buy this in. The Rebbe actually explains now that this pasuk that we're talking about, this is really a general pasuk. It's not really. It says as karboni lachmi li ishai, the carbon, my bread li ishai, tishmru la'akriv li b'moyadoi. It doesn't talk specifically about the carbon tomid. This is the introduction of the parsha of all the carbonis. So and then the pasuk goes on. Hashem. You have the carbon tomid, and then you have the carbon yontiv. You have the Rosh Chodesh. You have all the carbonis that follow carbon Shabbos. You have all the carbonis that follow. But this pasuk that says as karboni lachmi liish tishma lachmi mayodoi is not a specific pasuk for a Chodesh. This is an introduction to the whole parshas. So, really, the Moyadai over here is really the same equal with the other carbonas. Let's look inside. But this is aber noch nicht kein Biur Maspik. This is, however, not yet a sufficient explanation. It says Mestaber zu zogen. It's logical to say, as der erste posik from Parshas HaKarbonis, the very first verse that opens up the portion of Karbonis, Tzaves b'nei Yisrael v'amarta leim as karboni lachmi liisha reich nechoich tishma la'akli b'mayadei. Instruct them, tell them to bring my korban to my fires, my aroma. Keep to take b'mayadei is agdoma klolis to the alle korbanos. This is a general introduction to all of the sacrifice that come in the following. It's not only for the next. It includes its introduction for Timidim, for Musafi Shabbos, which follows the Musaf Shabbos, V'Rosh Chodesh that follows V'Regolim and V'Regolim. Those are all the bread for my fires. And then later on, when it starts to tell you about Rosh Chodesh, about the carbon tomid, hyped on the pasuk, ois to tell on the prota carbonis. That's how we start the details. The agdom is for everything, and then the details. Yederim b'fnei atzmei, each carbon by itself, each time by itself. Unable for carbon tomid, we start with carbon tomid. So if this is the pshat in the pasuk over here, in other words, this is it's an introduction to the whole carbonis. Unlike that, we learned that this is just for Rosh Chodesh, for carbon tomid. This is for all carbonis. So come to us as if der word b'mayadei gate of the alle carbonis. Bring it in time, goes on all the carbonis, not talking only about Rosh Chodesh. With the pasuk rechen weiter this morning for jeden carbon. The Torah says later on, b'mayadei in each time. The mayad of Shabbos and mayad Rosh Chodesh or the Golim. So why does Rashi say specifically about the carbon tomid? The tomid kol yom is man. Rashi is not mevayer as oich batomid is the selbe pirush moide. That also by tomid, not only by tomid, also by tomid is the pirush moide. V'bald as bechol yom umoidat midim. Over here too, it's also in its time, because there's a time for the tomid also. But moyadoi goes on everything. Move on as the carbonis for Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, V'Regolim, seine nit ken Indian neuse of the tag. that the Karbanos Shabbos Rosh Chodesh are not something added to the days. The Ausgeteiltkeit, nor the Ausgeteiltkeit von the Tag is euch zu lieb the Karbanos Shal. But the distinction and the separation, why these days been separated, is also because of the Karbanos. Not like we were saying before, because they have other distinctions and then you just bring a carbon. They are distinguished because you bring the carbon. The text they are set and designated for the karbonis in these days. So if this is the day that you bring a carbon, that makes up the day. So if you miss the day, you can't. How are you going to bring a carbon? So the question goes back to its place. Why do we need a special lesson with regards to Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh that if the day passes, you can't bring the carbon? As the day passes, the carbon is bottle. If the whole reason why the day is made up is because of the carbon, so once the day is gone, how are you going to make up the day? The day is gone. So why do we need a limit over there? Just like we said, Legabik Carbon Tamid. So how is it different? The Rebbe originally tried to say that the Carbon Tamid is different than the Karbonos of Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh and Yom Tov, because by the Tamidim, the carbon makes up the day, but by Shabbos, it's made up by something else. You just bring a carbon then. But the Rebbe says the B'moya Day, the Yom is the same B'moya Day by all the Karbonos. So that means that over there too, the B'moya Day is what makes that day unique. So how are you going to bring a carbon that make another day unique once the day is gone? The other carbon, the other day has its own uniqueness, but this is not going to bring that. So why do we need a pasuk over there? As the Rebbe will continue to explain, in Zion that there's two parts. There is part of the obligation of the person, and there's also a part which is the korban itself. If a korban was designed, can we bring it out, as we'll see in the details in Zion. Zion. So the Rebbe says we can say the explanation by first introducing and explaining in the Chilukei Lashonos was man gefindt dabei, the different languages that we find what Rashi uses in this idea of when you miss the day, you miss the korban. By Shabbos schreibt Rashi an Arichos. By Shabbos, Rashi writes at length, Harei shelo hikriv b'Shabbosu. So if he did not bring the korban musaf on the Shabbos, Shomei ani Yaakov the Shabbos habo, you might think, I can hear that you should bring to the coming Shabbos. Talmud Leimer b'Shabbatoi. That's why it says b'Shabbatoi. Magid shim over yoime bottle karbonai, to tell us that if the day is past, there's no more carbon. As opposed to several verses later on, but after Shabbos, when the Pasuk talks about Rosh Chodesh, Rashi says B'Kitzer. U'biyachad im zeh gam ha'sofa, he says short, and also adds the word V'shuv. Shim over yoyme bottle korbanei. And then he says V'shuv ein lei tashlumim, and he has no longer a makeup. Frier in Parshas Emer of Pasuk Dvar Yem B'Yoyme, which is with regards to the Karbonos of Yom Tov, state Dr. Rashi B'Kitzer B'Li HaYsofa Ha'imover Yoyme Bottle Karbonai. There says if the day passes, there's no carbon. Is Bishleime by Rosh Chodesh V'Balta das kommt mit der Psukim Achri Prushe B'Shabbat. So we understand why by Rosh Chodesh, which comes just a few verses after the commentary on Shabbos, B'Shabbat, is move on. is understood. Was darf nicht noch mal immer chazer. Rashi doesn't have to repeat bariches. Haresh leikri b'rishchodesh zu v'chulu. If he didn't do on this chodesh, it said, "Ober b'negele korbanos hamayadim." B'parshas Emer, but with regards to the korbanos of the Yom Tovim in Emer, shelifnei. First of all, it's before. Ubesefer achar. It's in a different book. It's the Vayikra. It's the Bamidbar here. Aber sagt dorten bekitzur sagt nicht auf der sagt da bin ich Shabbos. Why does it say over there in short, and he doesn't say as it says b'Shabbos, Harishleikri b'Shabbos zu, Harishleikri b'Yom Tov zu? Why doesn't he say it like over there? Also, Mefarshim sagen as by Regolim darf nicht ankommen zu Limud. They want to say we don't need by Yom Tov. Because if you missed Pesach, you're not going to do it by Shavuos. If you miss Shavuos, you're not going to do it. It's a different Yom Tov. But the Rebbe says if you miss Pesach, you can do it the next Pesach. The Forschung sagen, as bei der Goldim darf man nicht ankommen zu Alimud, she'em mevim elus Yom Tov b'Yom Tov achar. That by Yom Tov we don't need a special lesson that you don't bring the oil of Yom Tov and the next another Yom Tov. Warum is pshita? Because of it's obvious as im lo yikrivu Pesach. We know if you didn't bring a Pesach, you're not going to bring a Shavuos. Tashlum milu Pesach. Afagav the Shavim b'Korban Nisayim. Even though they have the same Korbanis, become a Trei Shemes Nisnu. They're two separate names, so you're going to bring Pesach and Shavuos. It doesn't fit. Avo Shabbos is Rosh Chodesh. The Kulachat Shmonin, but Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh, they're all one name. So there is a svara that he should bring to make up for the first one because it's still Rosh Chodesh, it's still Shabbos, it's unique, it's not unique, different. So, what are we saying then by Yom Tov that you don't do it in the other Yom Tov? So, what does it mean there? As it relates to the karbanis of the Yom Tov, shoylo the tashlumim for ein tog Yom Tov in the shmete diken tog, to negate, to make up one day's Yom Tov that you have to bring the karbanis for that day on the later day, or if there's several days in the Yom Tov Gufa, that's coming to tell you within the Yom Tov itself. The 7 days of Pesach, 7 days of Sukkot, that you can't, if you missed out the Korban Musaf from that day, you can't bring it the next day. And they're saying that you don't have to bring, you can't bring it the other Yom Tov. It doesn't fit to bring the other Yom Tov. But the Rebbe says no. But l'cheira, we can still say that if you didn't bring it on this Pesach, you shouldn't bring it the next Pesach that has the same name. The Shail is aber farvos zol man darfen kein limud as im leikre bePesach zeh yakriv shtayim bePesach habo. That if you didn't offer this Pesach, Rashi says short over there when it comes to the Parshas Yom Tov. Over there says hoyim over yem batel korbane. Why don't we say? Why don't we say that you might think that if you didn't in loikre kor Pesach ikre Pesach zeh yakriv shtayim Pesach habo, but derech zeh benegei l'Shavuos. If you didn't do in this Pesach, so you'll bring the two in the next Pesach. Well, derech zeh benegei l'Shavuos. I'm not sure why the Rebbe is just bringing the example in Leikri Pesach Zeh Yakriv Shtayim Pesach Haba, and it says the Shavuos in Leikri Shavuos to bring the next one. Why is the Rebbe not saying the same thing by Sukkot, or maybe he's just giving an example? I don't know if I'm missing something here. Anyways, we'll go weiter. Ches. So the question, bottom line, is we still should, even though the Mefarshim explain that it doesn't make sense to bring Pesach's carbon in Shavuos or Shavuos carbon in Sukkot because it's different names, different Yom Tovim. But why shouldn't we need a pasuk that from one Pesach you can't do it to the next Pesach? Rashi just says you don't bring one and the other. We learned it now that it means within the Yom Tov itself, if you missed out the carbon, you can't bring it in the next one. And why don't we need a limud that not to use the carbon from one Yom Tov to the similar Yom Tov, which has the same name from Pesach to Pesach, or from Shavuos to Shavuos. I don't know why the Rebbe doesn't say it, for Sukkot to Sukkot. Why the Rebbe doesn't mention that? I'm missing something here. I'm not sure. Ches, yesh loymar the beer in them. So we can say the explanation. The Rebbe explains that there is two ideas to make up. It's either the person is making up, or you're making up for the object, the carbon. So if you have a carbon that has been prepared and you didn't use it, to use it at the next one. In the definition of making up, there are several ways. And of them is Aleph. One is for the person. He's coming forward to make up for an obligation he had a previous day, so he wants to do it now. That's for the perspective of the person. Beis b'tzadar chefza. There's a from the perspective of the object. Azach was mat gedarf tom mit a gewisser chefza. Tuterdos mit der chefza bisman shlachar. And something that he needed to do with a certain object, he does it with that object that he was supposed to do it before. He uses that object at a later time. For example, Valderech, what would be an object that you use later time? The tashlumim mitzad der mitzvah from the Heishivas Agzela Shagosa. The payment that he has to make, because the mitzvah is that he has to return the theft that he has